Welcome back to another episode of Revealing Biblical Truths. Today we're going to continue going through the book of Genesis and glean what we can from the text. Chapter 2 deals with the creation of the Sabbath, an in-depth look at the creation of man, the Garden of Eden, and the naming of animals, and the creation of Eve. After ending his work, Elohim rested on the seventh day. In verse 3, it says, "And Elohim blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Yah had made. So he sanctified the Sabbath day, that is, he made it set apart or holy." The Sabbath is mentioned many times in Scripture, most notably again in Leviticus 23 as part of the Shabbatot, or Moedim, Yah's holy days. Now, it says in verse 5 that it hadn't rained prior to this, but in verse 6 it says that instead there was a mist or dew that came up from the ground to water the plants. In verse 7 he creates man. "And the Yahuwah Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." The word man in Hebrew is Adam, and the word for ground is Adamah. The word's breath of life there is Neshama Hayim. And finally, living soul or living being is Nefesh Haya. In verses 8 and 9, he creates the Garden of Eden and all the trees, including the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. Then he describes 4 rivers coming from the tree of life. Next, he gives Adam the first command, which is to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In verse 18, he says that it's not good for man to be alone. Man was designed to have a helper or partner. He then brings all the animals before Adam, and Adam names them all. Adam was no dummy. He was very intelligent. How long do you think it would take to name all the animals? I'm guessing more than one day. Yah then puts Adam to sleep, and takes a piece of his side and forms Eve, or Hua, from it, and brings her to him. That word for rib is Strong's number 6763, Tselah, and means rib or side. Adam says that she was bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. Note that there is no mention of blood here. I believe, as it is mentioned in other texts, that Adam and Hua had glorified bodies prior to their fall, and they didn't have blood. Now, when Yahusha was resurrected, he appeared to the disciples, and yet had no blood either, only flesh and bones, because the blood had been spilled on his crucifixion. The chapter ends by saying, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This is the beginning of the institution of marriage. According to this text, a husband and wife or a marriage consists of cleaving to each other and being one flesh. Chapter 3 talks about the serpent beguiling Hua, and then Adam sinning also, followed up by Yah kicking them both from the garden. This chapter is pretty straightforward. The serpent comes to Hua and says, "We can eat of every tree in the garden except for this one, which is in the knowledge of good and evil." But the serpent told her that she wouldn't die, and that Yah was scared that they would be like him, knowing good and evil. Obviously he was lying. And then she went ahead and ate it and gave it to Adam too. In verse 8, it says that they heard the sound of Yah walking in the garden, so they were afraid and they hid. It's fascinating that Yah was actually there walking around in the garden. The Hebrew words there are Yahuwah Elohim, so this is the Father. But on many occasions, Yahusha, I believe, appears in the flesh before his incarnation. He appears to Abraham. He appears to Moshe in the burning bush and in the fiery furnace in Babylon. Could it also be that this was Yahusha too? It says Yahuwah, but to my knowledge only Yahusha appears in the human form in other times in Scripture. But I'll leave you to decide what that is. In continuing, Yah asks him if he ate of the tree and disobeyed, and Adam blames Hua and says she gave it to him. Then Hua turns around and blames the serpent. And by the way, the serpent in Hebrew is Nachash. In verse 15, we see the first prophecy. "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. This is talking about when Mashiach was crucified on Golgotha, the place of the skull, which is the skull of Goliath of Gath. Yah then tells Hua that she will have pain in childbearing, and tells Adam that he will have to till the ground and work hard to eat. The chapter ends with Yah removing them from the garden, saying that if they were to remain, they would eat from the tree of life and continue to live forever. He then puts cherubim at the east of the garden, and a lightsaber so they wouldn't come back into the garden. Well, it wasn't exactly a lightsaber, but it does say a sword with a flame that whirls around, so it could be. Anyways, it also mentions the cherubim, which is a plural form of the word cherub, a type of angel. The same type that Moses and Aaron made that sat on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And honestly, I'd never even looked at this before and seen this, the whole time it was there already though. I thought it was just one angel, but it's clearly plural, cherubim. It could have been there, it could have been 10 times, or there could have been 10 angels there. We don't know. It's crazy how we get more out of the scripture every time we read it. Moving into chapter 4, we see the birth of Cain and Abel. And it says, Adam knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from Yahuwah. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. In the process of time it came to pass, that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Yahuwah, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And Yahuwah had respect unto Abel and his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Following this, Yah talks to Cain, and says that if he does well, he will be accepted, but if not, he will get jealous and want to rule over his brother. My opinion on this is that Cain did not bring his first fruits or the best of his crops, while Abel did, and that's why Yah did not accept his offering. Cain then sees Abel in the field and kills him. He then says something very interesting. The voice of his blood cries from the ground. Most believe this is just a metaphor. However, I believe this is literal. Take a look at Leviticus chapter 17, verses 11 and 12. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, No soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourn among you eat blood. So in this passage, Yah is saying that the life is in the blood. That word life in Hebrew is Strong's number 5315 and means soul. This is the same word that was used when Adam was created. The Spirit breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living soul. So according to this verse, the soul is in the blood. This is why in verse 12 he commands that we abstain from eating blood. We are literally eating souls. Now jump back into Genesis. The voice of Abel's blood was crying from the ground. Abel's soul was crying from the ground. Yah then curses Cain and forces him to be a vagabond, roaming around. Cain is afraid for his life, but goes into the land of Nod, east of Eden. This is thought to be in the Afghanistan or Indian region, around Mount Paran. Cain then knows his wife and has a son called Enoch. Where did he get his wife at? It is known from the book of Jubilees and other books that Adam and Eve had many other children, men and women. He likely took one of his sisters, just as Seth would have done. And then the descendants were Irad, Mehujael, Methusael, and Lamech. And Lamech had 2 wives, Ada and Zillah. In verses 23 and 24, there is a story here about Lamech. And Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Well, what happened here? We really have no idea just looking at this text. However, it is written in the book of Jasher what happened. In chapter 2, verses 26 to 35, the story is explained. And Lamech was old and advanced in years, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. And Tubal-Cain his son was leading him. And it was one day that Lamech went into the field, and Tubal-Cain his son was with him. And whilst they were walking in the field, Cain the son of Adam advanced towards them. For Lamech was very old, and he could not see much, and Tubal-Cain his son was very young. And Tubal-Cain told his father to draw his bow, and with the arrows he smote Cain, who was yet afar off, and slew him, for he appeared to them to be an animal. And the arrows entered Cain's body, although he was distant from them, and he fell to the ground and died. And the Lord requited Cain's evil according to his wickedness, which he had done to his brother Abel, according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken. And it came to pass, when Cain had died, that Lamech and Tubal went to see the animals which they had slain. And they saw, and behold, Cain their grandfather was fallen dead upon the earth. And Lamech was very much grieved at having done this, and in clapping his hands together, he struck his son and caused his death. And the wives of Lamech heard what Lamech had done, and they sought to kill him. And the wives of Lamech hated him from that day, because he slew Cain and Tubal-Cain. And the wives of Lamech separated from him, and would not hear him all his days. And Lamech came to his wives, and he pressed them to listen to him about this matter. And he said to his wives Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, O wives of Lamech, attend to my words. For now you have imagined and said that I have slew a man with my wounds, and a child with my stripes, for their having done no violence. But surely know that I am old and gray-headed, and that my eyes are heavy through age, and I did this thing unknowingly. So Lamech was the one that killed Cain, and then he killed his son Tubal-Cain. Going back to Genesis 4, Adam and Eve have Seth, whose name means appointed. Then Seth has a son called Enos. That's the end of chapter 4. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Till next time, shalom.